Okay, let's dive right in. Today, we are peeling back the layers on one of the absolutely most misunderstood psychological phenomena of our modern age. It is a concept that's quietly shaping homes, relationships, and careers across the globe: the modern man-child. Consider this incredibly chilling clinical anecdote for a second. A therapist once noted that the hardest patient they ever treated wasn't the addict. No, it was the pleasant one. The 38-year-old guy who smiled, agreed with literally everything, and yet could not be reached at any real depth at all. We're starting right here because chances are you know this man. Or, maybe you quietly suspect you are him. He's an absolute master at slipping through life's cracks with a smile, agreeing with everything, but remaining entirely unreachable. And this hits on a massive core misunderstanding. We've all been fed this lie, right? The idea that this guy is just lazy, spoiled, and simply needs to grow up. But the truth is actually a lot darker. He is running a highly sophisticated survival program, and it is driven by a deep, deep phobia. Seriously, you have to completely kill the word immature in your vocabulary here because you cannot argue someone out of a genuine phobia of their own potential. To really understand this, we need to talk about Peter Pan syndrome. Back in 1983, clinical psychologist Dan Kiley issued a major warning. He observed teenage boys who just outright refused responsibility, and then he watched them age into 30 and 40-year-old men who did the exact same thing. But here is the terrifying part, the false negative. The man-child is incredibly charming. By hiding behind this brilliant disguise of likability, he often looks like the most fun, put-together guy at the party. So, how do you spot him? Well, his ultimate tell is that everything is about to happen. If you listen closely to his language, you'll hear this verbal tick on repeat. He's about to start the business, about to get in shape, about to finally commit. He lives permanently in these untested, completely safe tense of possibility. Why? Because, psychologically speaking, a plan that hasn't started simply cannot fail. But here's the thing. A man-child cannot survive in a vacuum. He desperately needs what Dan Kiley called the Wendy. The crucial point here is that the man-child's helplessness is actually an automatic broadcasting signal. He's unconsciously asking someone out there, a partner, a mother, a sister, to step in and run his life so he never, ever risks failing at it. The Wendy absorbs those adult tasks and unknowingly acts as his anesthetic. Psychologists call this a complementary arrangement. It's fascinating, really. The Wendy's overfunctioning maps flawlessly to the man-child's underfunctioning. She absorbs the responsibilities, he relies entirely on her competence. Over time, her entire identity becomes built on being needed, while he is just quietly permitted to remain incompetent. They aren't just two people with bad habits. They operate as a single organism, unequally dividing the heavy lifting of adulthood. There's a brilliant saying that perfectly captures this: her competence is the water the ship is sinking into. The elegant cruelty of this dynamic is that while the Wendy truly thinks she is saving him by catching him every single time he falls, she is actually funding his condition. Every time she steps in, she is teaching him that the ground isn't real. She's proving that the consequences of being a child are always, always paid by someone else. Now, to understand why this happens, we have to go back to an origin that might actually surprise you. You'd think he was neglected, right? Nope. Instead, he was crippled by a love so anxious it removed all of his obstacles. By stealing his struggles, this anxious love prevented him from ever discovering his own resilience. And the result? A boy who grows into an entitled adult, fully expecting the universe to just deliver rewards without any of the necessary labor. The legendary psychologist Carl Jung explored this deeply through the concept of the Puer Aeternus, the eternal child. This describes a man whose unconscious mind is constantly pulled backward toward total safety, permanently bound to the mother archetype. To this specific type of man, every single adult responsibility feels like an exile. It feels like he's being kicked out of that warm Eden where absolutely nothing was required and everything was perfectly provided for him. And Marie-Louise von Franz noticed an incredibly eerie tell in these men. They often have this deep, almost obsessive fascination with flight. They dream of being a pilot, a mountaineer, or just soaring above it all. Their psyche is quite literally confessing a desire to stay aloft in pure possibility. They want to avoid at all cost the gravity, the weight, and the heavy friction of living an ordinary, committed human life on Earth. Which brings us to a layer almost no one wants to say out loud: the stark difference between a mother's devotion and a mother's self-protection. Devotion smooths conflicts to genuinely protect a child. But self-protection, that keeps the child dependent to guarantee her own relevance. Let's be brutally honest. A son who never becomes a separate, competent man is a son who never abandons her. It is a cage, but it's a cage built entirely out of affection. So, watch what happens to a man like this when he falls in love. It follows a predictable, frankly catastrophic timeline. Month 1 is all pure possibility. He's intoxicating, he's present, he's incredibly romantic. But by month 6, reality asks him to land and actually commit to a definitive path. And by month 12, he hits the avoidant threshold. He completely bolts to protect his infinite fantasies from the demanding gravity of real life. In psychology, we call this the avoidant pattern. It's an attachment style where closeness itself is experienced as a literal physical threat. The moment intimacy asks for a definitive choice, his nervous system just completely floods. You see, committing to one real future means murdering every fantasy future he's constructed in his head, and something deep inside him recoils from that choice as if he's touching a hot stove. It all boils down to this harsh reality. The variable isn't the women. The variable is the threshold. He will happily blame bad timing or claim his exes were crazy, but the only actual constant across a decade of failed romances is him. He leaves at the exact moment things become real. He hits the exact same threshold every single time. But here is what should disturb you the most. Society has morphed into a perfect modern nursery. The world has evolved so dramatically over the last 20 years to build a massive, complex civilization that is perfectly suited for his private psychological vulnerability. It gives him absolutely endless, incredibly comfortable places to hide. A key part of this is something called emerging adulthood. This is a life stage identified by psychologist Jeffrey Arnett back in the year 2000. He described it as a role-less role, a period of identity exploration with absolutely zero deadline to actually choose a path. Now, while this extended runway is a true gift for a healthy person, for the man-child, this stage is a permanent paradise. It constantly whispers in his ear, "You don't have to decide yet." His modern cage is practically invisible. I mean, think about it. He's surrounded by entertainment engineered to be hyper-rewarding, infinite dating menus where no choice is ever final, and effortless validation manufactured directly from a screen. Unlike the man-child of 1950 who basically had to grow up or starve, today's man-child lives inside a highly sophisticated machine, purpose-built to make his cage feel like absolute freedom. To put this into perspective, just look at the staggering number, 1 million. That is the estimated number of hikikomori in Japan right now. These are men who have withdrawn so completely from adult life, driven by a paralyzing terror of being tested, that they haven't left their rooms in months, sometimes even years. It's the extreme, absolute endpoint of this psychological hiding. But in many places, it's a lot more subtle. Welcome to the invisible basement. Today's man-child is much harder to spot because he isn't necessarily living with his mother. He actually performs adulthood flawlessly on paper. He might have a totally safe career and superficial relationships, but his life remains strangely hollow. He is carrying his invisible basement inside him wherever he goes. When we strip away all the symptoms and look straight at the core engine of this behavior, the verdict is crystal clear. He isn't just avoiding starting a business or refusing to commit for the fun of it. He is driven by a paralyzing terror of not being enough. He's doing the most logical thing a frightened creature can do, avoiding the very arena where he finds out what his true worth actually is. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard captured this beautifully when he wrote, "The most dangerous condition is the despair of refusing to become the self you actually are." The true tragedy of the man-child is not that he tries and fails. No, it's that he never tries at all. He just seeps into this low ambient flatness that Kierkegaard called being in despair without even knowing it. So what's the way out? How does this end? The grown-up steps out of about to and firmly into now. A self that is never tested by reality is not being protected. It is just being slowly, quietly buried by the kindest possible hands. You have to let the thing become real, even if it means it might fail. I want you to turn the lens gently the other way for just a moment, because almost no one is purely free of this pattern. What is the thing you keep meaning to start? What's the conversation you keep meaning to have? The version of yourself you promise to become next year? Whatever that is, that right there is your own personal zone of perpetual postponement. Which leads us to our final provocative question for this explainer. Where is your nursery? Because stepping out of that safety and into the heavy, magnificent tents of now, where things can break, where where things can hurt, and therefore where things can finally count, is the only true way to escape it.